Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Paint a Mini. So I figured let's just get right on to the star of the show for all of our Reaper Doom miniatures. Let's just go ahead and paint the Doomguy himself. You know, Doomguy. Yeah, so I'm gonna do something a little bit different with this video too. I am going to do it like the old-fashioned way that I used to paint miniatures, where I do a black base coat and I only use paints. No washes, no shades, none of that stuff. We're just going to be using solid layers and dry brushing techniques for all of our shading. The first thing that I want to start with, I think, are going to be his arms, because he does have bare arms. Not a whole lot. He's just got, you know, this arm right here, and then this other arm, you know, right here. There's not a lot of skin showing, but there's still a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to start with is a little bit of a darker skin color. We're going to be using some tanned shadow right here. This is just a dark, sort of tanned skin color that we're going to be using. And we're going to use that as a base coat for the arms, and we're going to dry brush a little bit after that. So let's just get a little bit of this out first. We don't need very, very much, because, again, the arms are not particularly prominent. There's not a lot of skin showing. I think that I can just safely use this Reaper medium round brush here. I think it's just a 1 gauge or 1... I still never even looked up the numbers on all of these brushes. I don't actually know what these numbers mean, which probably says something about my professionalism, but still. Alright, we're just going to apply a nice even coat over his arms, and then we'll move on. Alright, so now we've just got a nice solid layer of some tan shadow on his arms right there. I'm going to rinse that brush. And then next up I want to bring a little bit of highlighting to those arms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out some tanned highlight. This is basically the same sort of color tone, but it's a much fairer color. So we're just going to dry brush that very lightly over the arms, and that will add just a little bit of, you know, highlighting to his arms and brighten those arms a little bit and not make them look quite as flat. So I'm going to take out a, I haven't used my Citadel dry brush in a while. I'm going to use this one here. This is a small size Citadel dry brush. Now when it comes to dry brushing, I've said this about 6,000 times on the channel, but in case there's anybody new to it that hasn't seen it before, you're going to take your brush like this and you're just going to sort of nudge your brush into your little paint puddle just a little tiny bit. Not very much. You're actually wiping off most of the paint. That's why they call it dry brushing, is because you've got such a small amount of paint on the brush that it is almost dry. And, you know, one thing that you can do too is you can just kind of like take your brush and just sort of dip it into your paint puddle and then just sort of wipe it off with a paper towel. But I like to do this method right here. It's just not quite as wasteful paint-wise or whatever, and yeah, it's just nice and it works out just fine. So, okay, so you can see that that brush there is nice and loaded up with all that paint. And then we're just going to lightly go over the arms with this tanned highlight, and that'll probably brighten up those arms a little bit. Yeah, you can kind of see that that muscle starting to become a little bit more emphasized now. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Now, pretty much one thing that is a downside of dry brushing is that you tend to get a little bit of paint onto the surrounding areas. In this case, like the gloves and the armor right there, but it's not a huge deal. We're going to go over those things with other colors later on, so don't worry about it. If you really want to, you can kind of go back over them with, you know, some black after you finish this step. You know, in case you get like some armor, you know, some of this tanned highlight onto the shoulder pads or whatever, and you don't like that, you can just go back over that with some pure black and it'll be just fine. Okay, yeah, so that's one arm done. Doesn't look too bad, and we're just going to do the same thing with the other arm really quickly. Alright, so yeah, you can just kind of see that that adds a little bit of, you know, some color variety and all that to the arms. So that looks fine, so I'm going to rinse off that brush. Next up, we're going to move on to another color. We're going to move on to some earth brown. This is just a really kind of standard run-of-the-mill brown color. Works pretty well for most things that you want to just do some brown with. We're also not going to need very much paint, although we are going to be doing a couple of things with this. The first thing that I kind of want to do is I want to just paint the shotgun like stock and the pump. So I'll just go back to that medium round brush that we were using earlier. Alright, and if you can, just try to avoid getting this paint onto the gloves and the gun barrels and that kind of thing. Just take your time. You'll be okay. I love these old school Reaper miniatures, these old Reaper sculpts, and I guess they're called heroic scale. Everything is just a little bit proportionately, bigger than, realistically, than reality, whatever. But when it comes to tabletop miniatures, when it comes to looking at a small thing on your table, I think that it actually looks pretty good. So, like, this shotgun is enormous, and I feel like it wouldn't really be that big, so are his, hands and head. They're just really, really big. But they look great for tabletop miniatures. And, most Reaper miniatures are still done like that, I suppose, but, yeah, these old school, sculpts here, I don't know, there's just something that's really, really fun and charming about them. This shotgun has some iron sights on the gun, too, which is just a nice little touch. Alright, so there we go. So now the shotgun just has a nice, solid wood sort of look to... Oh, we forgot to do the pump. Silly me. There we go, so now we got the pump on the shotgun there. Okay, I'm going to rinse that brush off. Now we're going to continue using that earth brown color, but this time we're going to look at his gloves. Now, if we look at the original sort of the cover art or the main title screen for Doom, he's got very dark gloves. And when you look at sprite work for the actual in-game, first-person perspective, he seems to be wearing sort of brownish gloves. So I figured we'll just go ahead and do some dark brown gloves. So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to leave them black like that, but then we're just going to dry brush those black gloves with this earth brown color. And that should keep them relatively dark while still adding a little bit of a brown tint and bringing them out just a little bit. There we go, so that just adds a little bit of color and variety to his gloves. Alright, that looks great. Next up, I want to bring out all of the silver and steel stuff that we're going to do. Now, the first thing that we're going to do, obviously, is the barrel of the shotgun, but then also the helmet. I figured we'll go ahead and make that sort of a nice industrial, steel silver color like that. Now, if we look at the original sprite work, it's more of sort of a gray color scheme. But that's okay, because I kind of imagine the helmet is going to be, I don't know, yeah, sure, like maybe the helmet is just a little bit more, metallic or whatever. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take this Game Color brand Chainmail Silver. This is just a nice, bright, metallic, shiny silver, metallic color. If you want, you can use honed steel, but I've been using this color a lot, or, any other sort of steel color or anything like that. But I've been using this color a lot lately, and it's been working out really well for me. Now, you can do this in one of two ways. You can either do what I'm going to do right here and just use a dry brush, and I'm going to go over the whole helmet with a dry brush, as well as the barrels themselves. Or, if you want, you can just take, maybe not the medium round brush that we were using, but maybe you could take, like, a smaller sized round brush, and then you can just kind of go over, each, part of the helmet, each part of the barrel, but, kind of leaving off the lower crevices and all that, just to, kind of add some shadow in there, so leave some shade in there. But that's okay, that kind of takes a little while too, so we're just going to go ahead and do our standard go-to dry brushing technique here. Another thing that you can do too, if you really want to, is you can just do whatever base coat that you want, and then you can just coat it in a complete even coat of this chainmail silver or honed steel or whatever color that you want to use, and then you can go over it with a black shade or a black ink or a black wash or anything like that, and that will fill in all of the recesses and all that. But like I said, for some reason I wanted to tackle this one in a more sort of traditional way that I used to do it back in the day. So I'm going to be using all dry brushing techniques for this. All right, there we go. Now he's got a nice bright silver helmet there. That looks neat. Okay. And we're just going to do the same thing with the shotgun barrels there. I suppose I should say actually just the one barrel like this, because that lower barrel where the pump is at, that's kind of hard to get into with this dry brush. And I kind of want to do some more finesse work with this steel color anyway. So we're just going to do the barrel real quick, and then we're going to rinse this off and use a different brush, and you'll see what we're going to do there in a minute. Yeah, there we go. That just gets a nice even coat there on the barrels. Or on the one barrel, I suppose. There we go. Okay. Rinse that off. All right, and then we are going to use that itty-bitty small-sized Reaper round brush that I was talking about just a minute ago, and I'm just going to really carefully go over the iron sights. Just to bring them out just a little bit. And I'll go ahead and do the trigger here, or the I don't know what you call it. It's the little like arch that kind of goes under your finger with the barrel, not the actual trigger itself, but the sort of like, you know, trigger guard? Maybe that's what it is. Is it trigger guard? I honestly don't know. I don't know guns. Can you tell? Alright, and then we're just going to do the bottom barrel here too, but we're going to use a more detailed brush for this. And if you want, you can just kind of touch up the regular barrel itself too. There we go, so now the shotgun has its nice look to it. Okay, that looks cool. Alright, so now I'm going to rinse that brush off. Alright, and let's get down to business. Let's get the green going on our Doomguy here. So I'm going to take out some leaf green. This is just a nice kind of standard, slightly darker shade of green. It's just a, you know, decent little green color. Uh-oh, my paint nozzle might be stopped up here. Uh-oh, that's okay. You can use either a safety pin or what I actually bought here recently. So you can use either a safety pin, or you can use one of these little ball head pins right here. Probably a little bit easier to get in there and just pull right out and just kind of loosen up your paint nozzle a little bit. There we go. Oh, yep, that loosened it up for sure. Okay. There we go. All right. We'll get a decent sized little puddle right there, because we are going to use this a fair amount. Alright, and we'll just continue using that medium Reaper round brush that we were using earlier. Alright, and I'm just going to coat all of the armor, the entirety of the breastplate and the shoulder pads, but then I'm also going to go ahead and do the pants, except for the knees and the boots, because those are a different color that we'll go over in a little bit here. But yeah, if you just want to paint the whole guy here with this leaf green color, then that will get your first coat. So let's do that. This is going to take a little while too. You want to take your time with it. You want to make sure that the details are nice and crisp. So don't rush it. But don't be afraid to take your time. You're here to unwind. You're here to relax. You're here to have fun. So don't be daunted by something taking, you know, a few minutes out of your afternoon. Another thing too is that the belt on the original sprite work is actually gray, which is a similar sort of color scheme to his boots. So if you want to paint around them, I would encourage you to do so, just for the sake of practice or whatever. Wow, a cat just jumped off of my china cabinet. She's fine. But yeah, just for the sake of, you know, getting some practice in and getting good at painting and all that, I would say just go ahead and try to go around the belts and the belt and the pouches and the boots. Alright, so now we've got our nice green Doomguy going there. He looks great so far. I'm really happy with him. Okay, rinsing that brush off. And then next up, we're going to brighten up that armor pretty substantially. Well, I mean, not like super substantially, but we're going to brighten that armor up a little bit. We're gonna give it some depth. So we're going to use some pale green right here. This is a nice bright green color. We're going to dry brush all of the leaf green with this pale green, which you probably guessed was coming in, but that's what we're doing. All right, let's continue to just use the small Citadel dry brush that we had been using. And we'll just go ahead and do our same dry brushing technique here. Loading up our paintbrush, wiping off most of it. Okay, well, let's just get to it here. Now take your time with it. You want to try not to get this pale green onto any of the other colors that you've already done, such as the helmet or the gun or whatever, just because that'll add a little bit of weird coloration to those items. I mean, if you get a little bit of paint on there, it's not a big deal. It's not going to be the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. But still, you know, just be careful. Take your time. Like I was saying earlier, you're here to have fun. You're here to unwind and relax. So take your time. Don't rush it. It'll turn out great. Another thing that dry brushing does is that you get this kind of like rugged, rough texture a little bit, which in some cases you don't necessarily want, but I feel like for rugged, grizzled space marines, who's probably seen a lot of action with this type of armor, I feel like it works pretty well. So you're going to get a little bit of texture by doing this dry brushing technique, but I don't think that that's really a bad thing. And if you don't want to do the dry brushing technique at all, you want to stick with your shades or your washes or whatever, that's fine too. You could probably just use some, you know, a standard, you know, green color, and then probably use like a Agrax Earth shade or some other, you know, just dark brown shade or whatever for depth, for shadow or whatever. That's up to you. Like I said, I haven't done a solid dry brushing paint job in a long time, and I just was really wanting to do this, so I'm glad that I did, because he's coming out pretty great. All right, there we go. So now we've got nice, bright green power armor. He is ready for action. He's locked and loaded and ready to go. Okay, rinse that off. We don't have a lot more to do. We're just going to do the boots and the belts, and then we're going to do some detail work. All right, next up, we're going to use a color that I don't remember if I've used for the channel yet or not, but this is Twilight Blue. What this is it's a really kind of... It's a weird gray color. It's kind of gray, but it's got a little tiny bit of a blue tint to it, so it's like a grayish, bluish sort of color. So we're going to use this as a base coat for the boots and the belt, and we're also going to do some stuff with the visor and the base. Tell you what, let's start with the visor while we've got our paint nice and thin down there. I'm going to take the small-sized Reaper round brush that I was using earlier, and I'm just going to very carefully go over the visor with this midnight blue color, or twilight blue. Jeez, twilight blue color. And that will just set his visor apart from the rest of his helmet. And then we're going to do something else with it later on, which you can do if you want. You don't have to, but I mean, we'll go over that when we get there. Yeah, just the visor here. Nothing too special. There we go. So now that just brings out his visor a little bit separately from the helmet, and that looks pretty darn great, if I don't say so myself. So I'm going to rinse off that little brush, because we don't really need to use it for much more. Next up, what I'll do is... it doesn't really matter what I do next. Tell you what, while we've got the paint nice and thin, let's go back to the medium round brush that we were using, and let's go over his belt. Because like I said, his belt has that sort of gray color scheme, similar to his boots. So we're just going to do the belt and the pouches here, and then we'll move on. Alright, so now we've got the belt nice and covered up there. Let's do the same thing with the boots real quick, too. Alright, there we go. So now we've got the knees with that dark gray color on there. I'm going to rinse that off. We're going to continue using that color. We're not quite done with it just yet. I'm going to do one more thing. It's not going to be a major thing, to be honest. It's just a little detail thing. I'm going to go back to the dry brush that we were using, and I'm just going to dry brush the base that he's standing on with this twilight blue color. And that'll just add a little bit of, depth to the base without detracting, from the rest, or detracting the eye, whatever, words, from the rest of the miniature. So we're just going to lightly do a dry brushing thing here. There we go, and that way the low contours of that base are still nice and dark. But there's just a little bit more depth for the base itself. There we go. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to rinse that brush off, and we're nearing the end. We're in the home stretch here. All right, and we're just going to use some rainy gray. This is just a really nice light gray color. It's a little bit lighter than the gray color that we just used. And we're going to dry brush the boots and the belt with that rainy gray color. So let's do that. Just going to continue using the same dry brush here. Will work out just fine, I think. Still probably a little bit wet from when I rinsed it off, but that's okay. This will be fine. There we go. Alright, and you're just going to lightly dry brush, the knee pads there, and the boots, and the belt, and then that'll do it. There we go, so now the boots are nice and covered up there, so we're just going to do the same thing with the belt and the ammo pouches real quick. There we go. All right. He's looking great. He's pretty much done. But we're going to do two more little detail things. The first of which is that he's got kind of a prominent belt buckle there. And I figured we'll go ahead and brighten that up a little bit. He's also got little studs almost on his pouches. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the itty bitty teeny, small-sized Reaper round brush that we were using. And I'm going to take out some new gold here. This is just a nice bright gold color here. And, maybe you could do the belt buckle with, like, the chainmail silver that we used earlier, or you could use, like, a bronze color. You can use whatever color that you want for this, but I just really, really like this new gold color for this kind of thing, so I'm going to use it. And we're just going to lightly get the belt buckle and the little buttons on his pouches. And that'll add just a little bit of nice extra detail there. Alright, really the only ones that have really prominent buttons are those ones directly on the front there. And I think that will be just fine. Alright, and the last thing that we're going to do is that we want to add a little bit of reflection to that visor. After all, it's supposed to be glass, right? So it's supposed to be kind of shiny, kind of reflective. So I'm going to take out some gloss varnish right here. Don't need very much at all. Like, honestly, you don't even really need a drop. That'll be just fine. And then you can use really any brush. It doesn't particularly matter. And you're just going to coat the visor with this gloss varnish. And that will just make sure that it's extra shiny and reflective, so it will reflect any light. Just like a normal glass visor would on a space helmet. And there we go. And there we go, yeah, see, that adds just a little bit of shine to the visor. And you know what? I think that will about do it. So there you go, everybody. That is the Doomguy from, or the Space Marine, or whatever you want to call him. He's Doomguy. He's Doomguy. That's Doomguy from the Reaper Doom miniatures. So thank you, everybody, for watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and throw it a like. If you want to see more miniatures being painted, you can subscribe to my channel. I tend to do that a lot. I'll talk about, you know, some gaming stuff, whether it's tabletop or video gaming or anything like that. Painting miniatures, all sorts of things. You know, I post a lot of stuff every so often, so yeah, you can subscribe. If you like the video, go ahead and throw it a like. And yeah, if you want to see the next, you know, whatever next Reaper Doom miniature you want to see painted, just let me know in the comments, and I'll get to it. I'm trying to knock out the whole line here. I think I'm about halfway through. So yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.